My fiancé said softly. I'm not sure about us anymore. I didn't raise my voice or beg. I simply canceled the wedding, closed that chapter, and walked away with my dignity. Months later, she realized doubt can cost more than certainty ever could. I'm not sure about us anymore. She said it quietly, not during a fight, not at the end of a long screaming match where words had already done their worst damage, not even after I had done something wrong. She said it on a Tuesday evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table we had picked out together, on a rainy Saturday 14 months ago, at a furniture store where she had laughed at how seriously I was measuring the legs with a tape measure. She had a half-eaten bowl of pasta in front of her. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her voice was soft, almost careful, like she had rehearsed it, like she had been waiting for the right temperature in the room before she finally let those words out. I remember the exact sound of the refrigerator humming behind me. I remember the way the overhead light caught the edge of her hair. I remember the weight of the ring on her finger, the one I had placed there 8 months ago on a beach at sunset, with my hands shaking so badly that she had laughed and held my wrist still. I remember thinking, this is the sentence that breaks everything. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just looked at her, and the refrigerator kept humming. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. We had been together for 4 years. I was 31. She was 29. The wedding was 6 weeks away. The venue was booked. The caterers had been paid a deposit. Her dress was already altered and hanging in her mother's closet. My suit had been tailored to fit. 142 people had cleared their calendars, booked hotel rooms, arranged flights. 6 weeks. That was the distance between that Tuesday evening and the day I thought was going to be the best day of my life. And she was sitting across from me, pasta going cold, saying she wasn't sure anymore. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the ground shift beneath me. Because I did. I felt it the same way you feel a car skid on ice before you've even registered that your foot hit the brakes. That split second of cold awareness where the body knows something before the mind is ready to admit it. But I didn't move. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't raise my voice. I sat very still, and I breathed, and I looked at her face, the face I had woken up next to more mornings than I could count, and I said, very calmly, okay. She blinked. Okay, she repeated. Tell me what's going on, I said. She looked almost surprised that I wasn't reacting the way she had apparently expected. She picked up her fork, put it down, picked it up again, and then set it aside entirely. I don't know how to explain it, she said. Try, I said. And she did. She talked for almost 40 minutes. I didn't interrupt once. I learned, in those 40 minutes, that she had been feeling this way for a while. That she wasn't sure if she was ready. That she loved me. She said that 3 separate times, as if repetition would make it land softer, but that she wasn't sure love was enough. That she had been watching her friends in marriages and thinking about how big a decision it was. That she had been scrolling through wedding photos of people she knew, and instead of feeling excited, she had felt something heavy settle in her stomach that she couldn't name. That she felt like maybe she needed more time. That she wasn't saying no, exactly. She wasn't saying end it. She was just saying she wasn't sure. She used the word pressure several times. Not pressure from me. She was careful to clarify that. Very careful. But pressure from the momentum of the situation itself. The deposits and the venue and the dress and the guests and the calendar that had a date on it. She said it felt like standing on a moving walkway, the kind you see in airports, and not knowing how to step off without falling. I remember thinking, as she said that I had spent months helping to build and maintain that walkway. That every conversation about vendors and caterers and table arrangements had been, on my end, an act of love, of excitement, of someone counting down toward the day he had been waiting for. And that same walkway had apparently been making her feel trapped. I listened to all of it. Every word. I held each sentence in my mind the way you hold something you suspect is fragile, carefully, at arm's length, turning it over slowly to look for cracks. When she was finished, she looked at me with those eyes that had always done something to my chest, and she said, say something, please. And I said, how long have you felt this way? She paused. A few months, she admitted. A few months. The invitations had already gone out. The honeymoon was already booked. I had already written my vows, not on paper, but in my head, assembled piece by piece over long commutes and quiet mornings, rehearsed in the private theater of my own mind until the words felt right. A few months. I nodded slowly. Why didn't you say anything before now? I asked. She said she didn't want to hurt me. She said she thought it would pass. She said she kept hoping that she would wake up one morning and feel completely certain and all the doubt would be gone. She had given it time, she said. She had tried to logic her way through it. She had even, she admitted, talked to Mia about it, weeks ago. And that landed with particular weight. She had talked to her friend about doubting our marriage before she had talked to me. I absorbed that. I didn't say anything about it in that moment. I filed it away in the back of my mind, quietly, to examine later. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "And you're telling me now, 6 weeks before the wedding, because it hasn't passed." She looked down at the table. "Yes," she said quietly. "I want to be very clear about something." I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not beg her to reconsider or tell her she was making a mistake or remind her of everything we had built together over 4 years. I didn't perform for her. I didn't try to convince her. Because here is the thing I understood in that moment, sitting across from her at that kitchen table, with the refrigerator still humming and the pasta still going cold. You cannot argue someone into certainty. You cannot love someone into choosing you. Either she wanted this life with me, or she didn't. And whatever she felt in that moment, that creeping, nameless doubt she'd been carrying around for months like a stone in her pocket, I couldn't take it from her. No speech I gave was going to dissolve it. No amount of reassurance was going to fill a hole I hadn't dug. I understood that. So instead of trying to fix it, I asked her one more question. I said, "Nora, what do you actually want me to do with this information?" She looked up. She seemed confused by the question, like she had expected a different scene than the one she was getting. "I don't know," she said. "I just needed you to know." "All right," I said. I got up. I cleared my plate. I rinsed it in the sink. I dried my hands. And then I said, "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. I think we both need some space to think." She didn't say anything. I walked down the hallway. I closed the guest room door softly behind me, and I sat on the edge of that bed in the dark for a very long time. Here is something nobody tells you about the moment your world shifts. It isn't loud. There's no dramatic soundtrack. The walls don't shake. The ceiling doesn't fall. It's actually very quiet. It's you, sitting in the dark, and this very particular kind of silence that settles over everything like the first snow of winter, soft and still and absolute. And you realize that something has ended. Not dramatically, not with slamming doors and shattered glass. Just quietly, the way a candle goes out when a window opens in the next room. I sat in that guest room, and I thought about 4 years. I thought about the night we met, at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, where she had made a joke about the wine being overpriced that had made me laugh so hard I'd nearly knocked my glass over. I thought about our first road trip, where we'd gotten completely lost in the mountains because she refused to let me use the GPS and insisted she could read a paper map, and we'd ended up at a diner that didn't appear on any map we'd ever seen, eating the best pie either of us had ever tasted. I thought about the night her grandfather passed away and she had called me at 2 a.m. and said nothing for the first few minutes, and I had just held the phone and said, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I thought about how I had meant that. I thought about how I had always meant it. And then I thought about what she had said at that kitchen table. A few months. She'd been carrying this for a few months. And I thought about the past few months, really thought, methodically, going back through them like flipping through old photographs. The weekend trip she had canceled last minute, saying she wasn't feeling well. The evening she had been unusually quiet and I had asked if she was okay, and she had said, "I'm just tired," and I had believed her. The morning she had looked at wedding planning websites and then quietly closed her laptop without showing me anything, which I had thought was just indecision about centerpieces. All those small, half-closed doors. I had been walking past all of them, knocking gently, hearing nothing, assuming it was fine. And suddenly, sitting in the dark guest room of the apartment we shared, I understood something that settled into my chest with a very specific weight. This wasn't a new feeling for her. And this wasn't the first time she had pulled away. I want to tell you something about Nora that I didn't understand while I was inside the relationship. She had a pattern. I could see it clearly now, in the way you can only see the shape of a maze once you're finally above it. Looking down at all the paths you walked, the turns you took, the walls you kept running into. Early in our relationship, maybe 8 months in, she had gone quiet for about 2 weeks. Withdrawn. Distant. She had stopped making plans. She had stopped reaching out first. When I texted, her replies were short and warm enough that I could tell myself everything was fine, but there was something missing from them. Something muted. When I finally pushed her to talk, she had said she wasn't sure if she was ready for something serious. She said she had come out of a difficult previous relationship and sometimes her instinct was to pull back when things started feeling real. I had been patient. I had given her space. I had told her I wasn't going anywhere, that whenever she was ready, I would still be there. And she had come back. She had come back warm and certain, and she had looked at me with those eyes and said she was sorry for pulling away, that she had just needed to get out of her own head, that she was sure about me. And I had felt so relieved that I had never really examined what that episode had actually meant, what it had cost her to come back, whether the thing that had made her pull away had ever truly been resolved, or whether it had simply grown tired of being loud. Then again, about 2 years in, she had brought up that she wasn't sure if she wanted to live in this city long term. Had I thought about possibly relocating? Had I considered that maybe our life plans weren't as aligned as we thought? I had spent 3 weeks carefully evaluating whether I could relocate. I had made spreadsheets. I had looked at job markets in 3 different cities. I had asked my manager, somewhat awkwardly, about remote work possibilities, and he had looked at me with the particular expression of a man who had not expected that question. She had, very naturally, stopped bringing it up, never mentioned it again. I had assumed she'd changed her mind. I had assumed that was simply what happened. People raised concerns and then, on reflection, let them go. Now I was starting to wonder if she'd just retreated. Decided it was easier to quiet the doubt than to face it head on. Tucked the uncertainty somewhere she didn't have to look at it until it got too loud to ignore. And I had always been there on the other side of the doubt, patient and steady, being the kind of man who did not waver, who did not push, who waited for her to come back to him. Reliable, predictable, safe. I had thought those were good qualities to bring to a relationship. Now, sitting in that guest room, I was starting to wonder if I had, without meaning to, taught her that her doubts had no real consequences, that she could pull back whenever the uncertainty got too loud. And I would wait. I would always wait. The particularly uncomfortable thing about that realization was this. I had never once, in 4 years, made it inconvenient for her to be uncertain. I had always made it comfortable. I had always made it safe. I had been proud of being the steady one, the anchor. But an anchor doesn't move. And I had not moved. Not once. Not until now. I didn't sleep much that night, but by the time the gray morning light started coming through the curtains, something had settled in me. Not anger, not grief, not yet. Something cleaner than both of those things. A kind of clarity. I knew what I was going to do, and it wasn't what she expected. The next morning I called my best friend, Owen. He picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked immediately, because apparently my voice told him something before I had even said anything. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to cancel the wedding," I said. The pause on his end was a beat longer than usual. "Not postpone," he said. "No," I said. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," I said. He let out a breath. "Okay," he said. "Tell me what you need me to do." That was Owen. No lecture. No attempt to talk me out of it. No performance of concern. Just, "What do you need?" I told him I needed him to help me make some calls. He said he'd come over in an hour. When I came out of the guest room, Nora was in the kitchen. She had made coffee. There were 2 cups on the counter. She handed one to me when I walked in, and I took it. And for a moment we just stood there in the kitchen in the morning light, not saying anything. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes had that particular look. The look of someone who has been hoping, all night long, that the morning would feel different. "Can we talk?" she said. "Yes," I said. "I need to tell you something." She searched my face. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what you told me last night." She nodded carefully. "And I've been thinking about us," I said. "About the past 4 years. About this pattern I've been letting happen for a long time." She frowned slightly. "Pattern?" she said. "You pull back," I said. "You get uncertain. And I wait. I give you space. I tell you I'll be here. And eventually you come back, and we carry on." She opened her mouth. "I'm not blaming you for it," I said, before she could speak. "I think I helped create it. Because I never let you sit with the consequences of the doubt. I always just absorbed it, made it comfortable, let you decide when you were ready to come back." She was very still. "I'm not doing that this time," I said. "What does that mean?" she said. Her voice had gone quiet. "It means," I said, "that I'm going to cancel the wedding." The color left her face. "What? Not postpone," I said. "Cancel. You're not serious," she said. "I am," I said. "Because I said I wasn't sure," she said, and her voice had started to pick up something. Disbelief, maybe, or the beginning of panic. "I wasn't saying I wanted to break up. I was being honest with you. I was telling you how I felt." "I know," I said. and I respect that. I'm glad you told me. Then why are you doing this? She said. And I looked at her, and I said something that I had never said to her before in 4 years. Something I hadn't even fully known I believed until I heard myself say it out loud. Because I am completely, absolutely certain that I want to marry you, I said. And I'm not willing to walk into a marriage with someone who isn't completely, absolutely certain about me. She stared at me. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe not, I said. But it's honest. I want to be very clear about something else. What I was doing was not a power move. It was not a manipulation tactic. It was not me trying to scare her into certainty by dangling the loss of everything in front of her. I genuinely meant it. I was done. Not because I was angry. Not because I didn't love her. I still loved her. Standing in that kitchen, watching her face go from shock to something that looked uncomfortably close to grief, I loved her. But I also knew, with the particular, unromantic clarity that a night alone in a guest room had given me, that love was not enough to build a life on if the other person was only there in the moments when the doubt was quiet. I had been the kind of man who stayed, who waited, who made himself smaller and more patient every time the uncertainty crept back in, telling himself that this was what good partners did. But nobody had ever asked me what I needed. And what I needed, what I had always needed, was someone who chose me, fully, not only when the doubts happened to be quiet, not as the best available option when nothing better had presented itself, not as the safe, reliable, predictable constant she could always come back to. I needed to be chosen. And I finally understood that waiting forever for someone to make up their mind about you is not love. It is hope wearing love's clothing. The next 72 hours were among the hardest of my life. Not because I was second-guessing myself. I wasn't. They were hard in the way that any necessary, irreversible thing is hard. The way it feels to close a door that you know you will never open again. Owen came over and sat with me while I made the calls. The venue coordinator was sympathetic. We lost the deposit, a significant amount of money, but the wedding was off. The caterer was similar. Her team was understanding, but the deposit was non-refundable. The florist, the photographer, the hotel block for out-of-town guests. Each phone call had the same quiet devastation to it. The awkward condolences, the paperwork, the clinical dismantling of something I had spent months building. Owen sat in the corner of the room with a cup of coffee and said nothing, which was exactly what I needed. By the time I'd made the last call, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. You okay? Owen said. No, I said. Good, he said. You should feel something. Doesn't mean you did the wrong thing. He was right. Nora had gone to stay with her friend Mia the same day I started making the calls. She had packed a bag with the particular efficiency of someone who is trying very hard to hold themselves together, and she had stopped at the door and looked back at me with something on her face that I couldn't fully name. Not just sadness. Something more complicated. Almost like a question she hadn't finished forming yet. You could take a few days to think about this, she said. I have, I said. You took one night, she said. I've been thinking about it for 4 years, I said. She didn't respond to that. You could take a few days to think about this, she said. I have, I said. You took one night, she said. I've been thinking about it for 4 years, I said. She didn't respond to that. She opened her mouth once, then closed it. She looked at the window, then back at me. I don't think you're being fair, she said, and her voice had steadied itself into something more composed. I told you how I was feeling. I was being honest. That's what you're supposed to do in a relationship. Be honest. And I was honest, and now you're punishing me for it. I'm not punishing you, I said. You're canceling the wedding, she said. Because you're not sure you want to get married, I said. I said I needed more time, she said. Nora, I said, and I set my coffee down on the counter. More time to do what exactly? We have been together for 4 years. We have been engaged for 8 months. If 4 years and 8 months isn't enough time to be sure, then I don't think 2 more weeks are going to do it. She flinched. Not dramatically. Just the small, almost imperceptible flinch of someone who has heard a truth they had been hoping to avoid. That's not, she started. I'm not saying this to be cruel, I said. I'm saying it because it's true. And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you know it's true. She looked at me for a long moment. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were wrapped around her coffee cup. What if I figure it out? She said. And her voice had gone quieter now, the composed steadiness cracking slightly. What if I just work through this and I'm sure, and this ends up being the biggest mistake of your life? I looked at her. Then it's my mistake to make, I said. That's not an answer, she said. It's the only honest one I have, I said. She left. and I stood in the hallway of our apartment, which was technically my apartment. She had moved in 14 months ago, and I listened to the sound of her footsteps in the corridor outside, and then the elevator, and then nothing. Telling my family was its own particular experience. My mother listened in silence on the phone and then said, very carefully, "Are you absolutely sure?" "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, then I support you completely." She didn't ask me to reconsider. She didn't tell me I was being rash. She had met Nora. She had liked Nora. But she had also watched me, for 4 years, quietly rearranging myself to accommodate Nora's uncertainties without ever once asking if that was fair to me. I think, on some level, she had been waiting for me to finally ask myself the same question. My sister Qley, on the other hand, had questions. Lots of questions. She called me 3 times in one afternoon. The third call, I let go to voicemail. Her voicemail was 6 minutes and 42 seconds long and covered, among other things, the importance of communication, the reality that all couples go through periods of doubt, a story about a friend of hers whose cold feet had turned into a wonderful marriage, and a fairly pointed suggestion that I might be running away from something hard. I listened to the whole thing. Then I texted her, "I'm not running." I finally stopped waiting. "There's a difference." She called again. I picked up. "Explain," she said. So I did. By the end of the conversation, she was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "I didn't know about the pattern." "Neither did I said. "Not clearly. Not until I had to look at it." She said, "I'm sorry. Don't be." I said, "I'm okay." And the strange thing was, I meant it. In the weeks that followed, the world had a particular quality to it. Everything that should have hurt more than it did. I had expected the grief to hit harder, had expected to be wrecked by it, to be the person staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. unable to breathe. And there were moments like that. There were definitely moments. A morning when I was in the shower and it hit me all at once. The wedding that wasn't happening, the life I'd been certain I was walking toward, all of it gone. And I sat down on the shower floor and pressed my forehead to my knees and let myself feel it. All of it. For about 10 minutes. And then I got up, dried off, made breakfast, went to work. Because the strange, uncomfortable truth that nobody tells you about grief is this: you can survive it. You go through it and come out the other side, and the world is the same world, the same streets, the same coffee shop, the same colleagues, and you are quietly, fundamentally different. Not broken, different. Nora texted me at the 2-week mark. She said she had been thinking. She said she missed me. She said she thought we had made a mistake. I read the message sitting in the parking garage at work, leaning against my car in the half-dark of the concrete structure, and I sat with it for a long time. And I noticed something. I did not feel the rush of relief I would have expected. The part of me that had spent 4 years waiting for her to be certain, that part didn't leap up and say finally. Instead, I felt something quieter, steadier. I texted back, "I'm glad you're okay. I'm not in a place to talk right now. Please give me time." She replied immediately, "How much time?" I looked at that message for a while. Then I put my phone in my pocket and went back upstairs. I threw myself into my work with a focus I hadn't felt in years. Not as an escape, or not entirely, but because I had been neglecting certain parts of my professional life in the slow, comfortable drift of building a domestic existence with someone. And it turned out I had ideas I had been sitting on, projects I had been telling myself I'd get to after the wedding. Ambitions I had allowed to idle because everything in my life had been oriented toward a single future point. The wedding. The life after the wedding. The version of myself that existed after I had checked that box. With that future point gone, I had to reckon with the present. And the present, it turned out, was full of things I had been postponing. Owen noticed. "You seem different," he said one evening, over drinks at the bar we went to when neither of us felt like cooking. "Different how?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "More like yourself, somehow." I thought about that. "Maybe," I said. "I was losing myself a little bit at a time for a while and didn't notice." He nodded. "The patient, available, never makes demands version of you," he said. "That always seemed exhausting." "It was," I said. "I just didn't know it was optional." Nora tried to reach me several more times over the following weeks. A few texts, a voicemail, an email, which was so carefully worded that I could tell she had rewritten it several times. In the email, she said she now understood what I had meant about the pattern. She said she had been thinking about it, really thinking, and she could see it now. She said she had been using my reliability as a safety net, and she had never fully appreciated what it had cost me. She said she was sure now. She was certain. She wanted me to know that. I read that email 3 times. I believed her, actually. I didn't think she was lying or trying to manipulate me. I thought she was probably telling the truth about what she felt in that moment. But here was the thing that her email couldn't address. She was certain now because the thing she had been uncertain about was gone. She was sure of me now because she no longer had me. The doubt had been replaced not by genuine clarity, but by loss. And those two things feel identical in the chest, but they are not the same thing. One is a foundation. The other is a scar. I wrote back. I kept it short. I said, I believe you. I believe that you feel what you're saying. I also don't think what you're feeling right now is the same as the certainty I needed 6 weeks ago. I'm not angry. I truly wish you well. But I can't come back to this. She replied once more after that. She said, I understand. I hate it, but I understand. I didn't respond to that one. I saved it. Not as a trophy. Not as proof of anything. I saved it because I thought one day, when the ache had fully settled into just a quiet scar, I might want to read it and remember that I had handled one of the hardest moments of my life the way I wanted to. With clarity. Without cruelty. Without begging. Without performing grief or rage for an audience of one. I had just walked away, with every piece of myself still intact. There's a version of this story that ends differently. I know that. There is a version where I see her message that night in the parking garage, and I call her back, and we meet somewhere, and she cries and I hold her, and we agree to go to couples counseling, and we figure it out. There are probably people reading this who think that version is the braver one, the more loving one, the version that honors the 4 years and the memories and the kitchen table and the road trip and the diner with the best pie in the world. I understand that view. I have even, in my weaker moments, entertained it. But I keep coming back to this. What would I have been choosing if I had gone back? I would have been choosing to marry a woman who had spent months carrying quiet doubt about our life together and hadn't told me. I would have been rewarding, for the 3rd time, a pattern of withdrawal and return that I had never asked her to change. I would have been saying, in effect, you can do this to me, and I will still be here. You can leave a lit fuse burning, and I will put it out with my bare hands, and we can pretend together that the powder was never there. That was not a foundation. That was a performance of a foundation. And I had spent 4 years being a very dedicated performer. I didn't want to perform anymore. I wanted to be certain. I wanted to be chosen. I wanted, and this is the part that had been hardest to admit, because it sounded simple to the point of foolishness. I wanted to be with someone who had never made me feel like a question waiting to be answered. It has been several months now. I have moved. Not far. Just to a different apartment. Smaller, quieter, entirely mine. My books are organized the way I like them, which Nora had always found excessive. My mornings are exactly as long or as short as I need them to be. I cook things I want to eat, and nobody looks at the dinner I've made with polite, barely concealed disappointment. I have also, and I say this not to prove a point, but because it is simply true, met someone. Her name is Vera. She is funny in a way that sneaks up on you, where you don't realize you're going to laugh until you're already laughing. She is direct in a way that is occasionally uncomfortable and almost always refreshing. On our 2nd date, she told me without any particular drama that she had been cheated on in a previous relationship and that honesty was not negotiable for her. Good, I said. Same. She looked at me for a moment. You don't say that like it's a reassurance, she said. You say it like it's actually true. I've had enough of comfortable dishonesty, I said. She raised her glass. So have I, she said. We have been seeing each other for just over 2 months now. It is early. I am not making any declarations. But I will say this. In 2 months with Vera, I have not once felt like a question waiting to be answered. She seems to know what she wants. She seems to want me. And I wake up in the mornings in my quiet apartment with my excessively organized books, and I think, this is what it was supposed to feel like. This is what I was settling for less than. I heard through mutual connections, not because I was asking, but because people talk, that Nora had also moved on, that she was well, that she seemed happy. I was glad to hear it. I meant that. I genuinely meant it. She was not a villain in this story. She was a person who hadn't been honest enough with herself to be honest with me, and who had, by the time she was ready to be honest, run out of time. That's a painful thing to carry. I didn't need her to suffer for it. I just needed to stop being the one who absorbed it. Someone who knew both of us ran into me at the market about 6 weeks ago. A casual acquaintance, a friend of a friend, the kind of person you always know slightly, but never fully. He looked a little uncertain when he saw me, like he wasn't sure what to say. How are you doing? He asked, with that particular careful tone that tells you someone has information about your life that they're deciding whether to reference. Really well, I said, and I meant it. He relaxed slightly. I heard about the wedding, he said. Yeah, I said. Sorry it didn't work out. Don't be. I said. It worked out exactly right. He blinked. I smiled. And I put my groceries in my cart and kept walking. I've thought about what I would tell someone who is sitting where I was sitting that Tuesday evening, across from a person they love, hearing words that could pull the rug out from beneath the entire future. And I don't have a neat, universal answer. I don't think there is one. But I know what helped me. I stopped asking the question, how do I fix this? And I started asking a different question. What do I actually need? Not what can I tolerate? Not what am I willing to endure in exchange for not losing what I have? What do I actually need? And the answer, my particular, personal answer, was, I needed to be fully chosen. And when I realized I wasn't being fully chosen, I made the only decision that felt true. I chose myself. The wedding deposits are gone. The dress is still, somewhere, in her mother's closet. 142 people had a Saturday, and spring suddenly freed up. The kitchen table is hers. She came and took it 6 weeks after everything ended, which felt right, because I didn't want to eat at it anymore anyway. I bought a new one, slightly smaller. Fits my apartment better. I eat at it in the mornings with coffee, reading, not measuring any legs. And I think about the version of me who was so careful, so endlessly patient, so willing to make himself smaller in the name of keeping the peace, and I feel something for him. Not contempt, not pity exactly, something more like compassion. He was doing what he knew how to do. He just didn't know yet that being the person who always stays doesn't make you the hero of the story. It just makes you the person who's always there when someone isn't sure. What I know now, and what cost me a great deal to learn, is this. Doubt, left unexamined, does not go away. It waits. It goes quiet sometimes. It lets you plan a wedding and pick out furniture and book a honeymoon and fit a suit. But it is still there, underneath all of it, patient as stone. And if you don't deal with it, really deal with it, honestly, even when it costs you something, it will eventually make its presence known. At the worst possible moment. Across a kitchen table. On a Tuesday evening. While the refrigerator hums. She learned that. I believe she learned it the hard way, the same way I learned everything that year. And I hope that knowledge is worth something to her. I hope she carries it forward into whatever life she's building. I hope she finds someone who makes her feel certain. Completely, unreservedly, full chest certain. Because that's what it's supposed to feel like. I know that now. I know it the way you know a thing when you've finally stopped settling for the approximation of it. And as for me, I finished dinner last night at my new table. Vera had come over and cooked. She had strong opinions about pasta, which I found unreasonably charming. And we had eaten and talked and laughed and sat in comfortable quiet when the talking ran out. And at one point she looked at me across the table the way that people look at you when they're just looking, not calculating, not measuring, not preparing a speech, and she smiled. And I thought, there it is. That's the thing I was missing. That's what certainty feels like when someone else has it for you. Not declared, not defended, just there, quiet and steady and real. The refrigerator hummed behind me, and I smiled back. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever waited too long for someone to choose you, the comment section is below. And if you're currently in a situation like this, remember, being patient is a virtue. Being a permanent option is not the same thing.